Hi.
Hey there, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can see you.
Great. How you doing today?
Thank you, Jonathan, for giving me opportunity to interview you for my YouTube channel and podcast.
Yeah, no problem at all. This is exciting.
So I thought to tell about the work that you're doing to my audience.
I'm an independent, mostly WordPress developer, but also general like PHP, MySQL developer. And so I've just started venturing out into trying to make my own SaaS products and release that online. And as part of that, have started trying to grow like a Twitter audience to just build in public and talk about what I'm building and hopefully have folks interested when I'm, releasing things. And I just released my first little SaaS application. I think it's been about 2-3 months, might have been a little bit longer than that. And so I'm trying to learn to market SaaS applications, which it turns out is much more difficult than building them.
So you're a WordPress pro and independent web developer.
Yeah, independent web developer specializing in WordPress. And with WordPress, I do everything from like, bug fixes to custom plugins to custom themes. I do a lot of, especially over the last few years, like hosting projects, infrastructure projects where somebody needs something other than just the standard, $15 hosting package that you're going to get online. Need something more specialized. So I've developed a subspecialty in like setting up high performance, like scalable WordPress applications, mostly on DigitalOcean. That's my favorite platform. I know a lot of folks love AWS, but every time I look at that AWS management panel, I just start to cry. It's it's so overkill for most of what I need to do, but DigitalOcean has a lot of that power without all of the complication.
So your SaaS site.
Yeah, it's called Noexpired.Domains. That's where you can find it, Noexpired.Domains, and it's a ridiculously simple idea, and it's one that I got because of the number of times that clients that I work for have called me in a panic saying, our website's down, our website's down. And of course, the first thing that I would do is go and check the server, right? Gee, there must be something wrong with the server. And a lot of times what happens is the server's fine, the WordPress installation is fine, but they accidentally let their domain expire because somebody missed the renewal email, right? So a ton of domain registrars still, the only notification you get is going to be in your email inbox. And especially for like organizations, nobody knows who's monitoring that email address, right? Like, if it's a big company, it's really easy to lose sight of who's getting the domain renewal notifications. So my little app, noexpired.domains, sign up and you enter any domain that you want to track. I think the limit right now is 50 domains for the $25 annual fee. You enter any domains that you want to track, regardless of whether or not you own them, regardless of whether or not you have like login information for the registrar. You just enter the domain, and then it uses the public whois data to track the expiration date. And if your domain gets within 30 days of the expiration date, it just sends you a text message. And so you can enter up to 2 different phone numbers to get notifications. And the idea being that like organizations or agencies, or even just people who have a lot of domains and want to make sure they don't lose any of their digital real estate, can have backup notifications to make sure that nothing ever expires and they don't lose anything or have any downtime.
So what are your experiences that made you to start this?
So with the SaaS specifically, it was really like just scratching my own itch, just to avoid. I mean, I use it for all my clients now. I just set up everybody who's like got me on retainer or anyone I have a regular like working relationship with. I add all of their domains to that tracking system so that I'll get a text if their domain's about to expire. And then that's just added value that I can give to my clients by calling them and being like, hey, your domain's got 10, 15 days left or whatever. You need to get in there and renew it. Of course, a lot of times in organizations, people don't even remember like what the login information is for the registrar. So I can give them a heads up and enough time to find all that and make sure it doesn't expire. So that was what it was born out of. And then I thought, well, if it's useful to me, maybe it'll be useful to others as well.
I can see you're providing so many services through other site of yours.
Yeah, so my consultancy business is called Oddjar, and that's at oddjar.com. And that sort of lists all the WordPress services that I provide for people. Lately, I've been building up the retainer side of it. So I offer these like monthly plans for people who know that they're going to need some WordPress help, some web help every month. And so I like base that on a certain block of hours, how much time they sort of estimate that they'll need every month. And on those, I do everything from, regular updates to making sure there's an offsite backup in place. It's amazing how many people still don't have, running very successful web businesses where the website is the crux of like all their income. And the only backup they have is the one that their host theoretically does. And if you know anything about web hosts, you'll know that most of them suck. There's a handful of good ones out there, but it's just the nature of the business. Most of them are terrible. And a lot of people trust that the web host is going to have a backup when sometimes they don't. Or if they do, it's not a recent one. So again, everything from those backups to updates and then whatever sort of custom help that they need. And a lot of that will involve just whatever the specific client needs, but it could include like building automations through Zapier. To connect different services, to move data around. Sometimes it's like extending adding a quick plugin extension or, a custom post type, all that kind of WordPress goodness.
So how many years of web development experience and experience in WordPress you have?
That's a good question. I got into it. I want to say I started web development specifically around 2001. So yeah, it's actually been a long time now, hasn't it? Suddenly I feel old. But I think I started around 2001, and at the time I was a newspaper reporter. And this was back when newspapers still thought the internet was just going to magically go away one day, or that they could more or less ignore it, certainly sideline it. But I was a newspaper reporter, and I was sitting in the newsroom one day, and like the managing editor or one of the controlling editors walked through and literally said something like, "Does anyone have any interest in like doing our website?" And I raised my hand, and so that's how I got started. That was the first site I rebuilt, was this newspaper website, and started working with WordPress pretty quickly thereafter. Moved over. I think the first system I ever worked with was Movable Type. Do you know Movable Type? It's kind of fallen off the radar, but it used to be like this hugely popular blogging thing, And then I moved over to WordPress after that, and then got into like custom PHP stuff, and haven't looked back since.
So you can do anything in WordPress.
Yeah, and I think that's something like a lot of people. WordPress is in this really interesting space right now, I think, because for the longest time, it was known as a blogging platform. And you can still, of course, set up a blog with WordPress. But if all you want is a really simple blog, a very simple blog, I think there are actually better alternatives than WordPress now. Like if you wanted a really simple blog, I would probably look at something like Ghost first, or one of those static blog generators. If you need something very simple, just because the maintenance is so much lower on those than it's going to be with something like WordPress. But that being said, you can still do a blog with WordPress, of course, but you can also build pretty much any other kind of site that you can imagine, including, and I think this is what a lot of people maybe don't realize now, including applications. Like you can build full-blown web apps on WordPress, and nobody has to know it's WordPress. I mean, you can do it so that they never see the traditional, WordPress dashboard, depending on what kind of an app you're building. So to me, that's the most exciting thing about WordPress right now, is how easy and fast it makes it to like quickly prototype a lot of different SaaS ideas, especially when you add in like my favorite plugin system, the Gravity Forms ecosystem. And then, you've basically got like a relational database inside your content management system, depending on how you want to set it up. So that to me is the most exciting thing going around WordPress right now. I mean, there's also some controversy with the introduction. WordPress a few years ago moved over to the block editor, and then a lot of people, myself included, felt that was like rushed out, like kind of rushed into the core before it was ready, that block editing system. I think now, though, it's very mature and very usable. But of course, now that they got that usable, they're pushing full site editing with the same sort of speed and throwing that into the core as they did with the block system. And now there's like 3 different ways to make WordPress themes. So a lot to keep up with. But it's still a very powerful, very capable system. And it's fed my family for going on 15 years now. So I've got mostly only good things to say about it.
So with how many website hosting platforms you worked with?
So over the last like 10 years, I think I've worked with almost all of them. I mean, I've just in terms of, when I started out, I did a lot of like small projects and bug fixes. That was kind of my specialty right when I got started. And when I was looking for clients, like back in those early days, WordPress had like a board, a message board where people could post and say, hey, I need help with this. And I would just shoot them an email, let them know about my experience, and tell them I think I can solve this for X amount of dollars. And if I can't, don't pay. So that's how I got started. And then I got a lot of experience in like fixing small bugs. And the good thing about that was I got very familiar with like, what's the way to put this? I got familiar with the crankier side of WordPress development. I mean, I got familiar with the sort of cranky little bugs that you tended to find, especially in the old days of WordPress. But I also got familiar with, to your original question, just a huge range of web hosts, GoDaddy, Bluehost, WP Engine, Kinsta, Media Temple. I'm sure I'm forgetting, a million of them, but because there are all sorts of little hosting companies out there. These days, whenever I can, I try to get people set up on like a DigitalOcean virtual private server. I think DigitalOcean calls them droplets instead of VPSs, but it's the same thing, little virtual machine. That's my favorite hosting environment for WordPress, because the difficulty with going with other kinds of WordPress hosts, I think they all call themselves managed hosting now, which sort of makes the word managed meaningless given the way some of them perform. But the difficult thing typically when you're dealing with a cheap or inexpensive WordPress host is they all have a very aggressive caching system in place, right? Which is fine if all you're doing is like a simple blog or a simple brochure site. But anytime you have a site that needs pages not to be cached, if you're going to build like a web app with WordPress, you can't have caching all over the place. It's going to screw up the experience, depending. Then all of those hosts and all of those very aggressive yet slightly different caching systems can cause all kinds of problems. So I fight with those a lot and work with those a lot and help clients find the right host depending on their site's needs, because there's no one right host for WordPress anymore. It depends on your use case and what your site needs to do.
Do you have idea how many websites in the internet are built on WordPress?
Oh, I forget the number. I think the last stat I heard was like almost 40%, I think. That might not be a recent number, but it's been the biggest CMS in the world for years now. And I think there was some consternation and worry in the WordPress community because I believe the most recent numbers that came out for WordPress use went down for the first time since they've been tracking it. WordPress use was going up and up and up and up and up, and I think the most recent numbers from earlier this year, it was just slightly down. And so there was a lot of worry over whether that was like starting a trend where people were moving off of WordPress. But I think most of that is over. I think most of that worry is overblown. It's a huge number of sites powered by WordPress on the internet. So for anyone who's looking to get into freelance web development, web design, I think I'm not saying that WordPress is the only way to do it, but I think the question you have to ask yourself when you're starting out is like, why not WordPress? Just because it is so flexible.
You worked with AWS?
Work with what?
AWS?
Yeah, so I use AWS, but only for specific things. So I use S3 as an extra backup. I like to keep 2 backups of all of my servers and all of my client servers. So I'll use S3 on AWS to keep a backup in addition to the one that's on DigitalOcean, or whatever the client's host is. I used its text to speech engine. I forget what they call that. What Amazon calls their text to speech engine, but I use that a little bit. So I've used AWS for like specific use cases, but I don't use it sort of broadly in the way that a lot of people do, where it runs everything. And I know it's very powerful and good for all sorts of things. It's just that number one, every time I open that administration panel, I feel like I lose 3 years of my life trying to find what I'm looking for in AWS. And number two, really for what I'm doing and for most of the time for the applications that I'm building and the scale that's needed for the sites that I'm building, AWS is overkill, I feel like. But yeah, if you're going to spin up the next Instagram, absolutely, you should use AWS. I don't know why you'd use anything else.
So what services that you provide?
Pardon?
What services you provide?
So there's the WordPress services, and then I also do some custom PHP MySQL apps, simple database stuff. I've also built larger applications using Laravel, that framework with PHP. Interestingly enough, the guy who created Laravel lives in the same state as I do, in Arkansas, here in the U.S., which is strange because no one lives in Arkansas.
Do you have any project that in your mind that you like, that you built?
Like other projects or projects that I've built, like other people's projects?
Your projects. I mean, you building other people's projects.
Oh yeah, so my favorite types of sites to work on are news publications, just because that's where I started out as a journalist, so that always has a soft place in my heart. And as somebody who started out as a journalist, it's been just horrifying and absurd to watch how determined, especially in the early years, publications were how eager they were to basically commit suicide by ignoring the internet or trying to outsource it or hoping it would go away. So I love working with that new generation of online publications, especially the indie ones, who are like breaking new ground and finding new ways to reinvent like responsible local journalism online. So I've got some clients that I work for here in Arkansas. There's a great one here in the city where I live, called the Fayetteville Flyer. So I've helped them as a developer on that site. There's another one called talkbusiness.net, Talk Business and Politics, and that's all like Arkansas local news. And I've helped them quite a bit. Years ago, I built a big student registration system for tutoring and supplemental instruction at a local university. I was really proud of that project. I used Laravel, and that was serving like thousands of students a semester. So that's probably the biggest scale project that I worked on, and that I was proud of how successful that was.
So what projects that you want to do?
Want to do next? So I've got I'm working on another little SaaS right now application to make it easier for newsletter publishers to accept and schedule advertisements in their newsletters, to let a potential advertiser come, type their ad into a text box, pick a publication date, pay and submit all in one, and then give the newsletter publisher a nice calendar where they can see which slots are taken, which slots are still available, order their ads, and really just sort of take control of that part of their business so they don't have to think about it. There aren't many, if any, good solutions for that. So that's the next one that I'm hoping to roll out here in about 2-3 weeks.
You are into web development from 2001, which is very long time. Uh, so, uh, so what are the changes that you observed in WordPress?
So, I mean, the biggest change both in WordPress and in development overall has just been watching JavaScript eat the world. The rise of JavaScript, which started as like this simple little thing, for some simple little page animations or something, and now is this compiled language that does everything from web apps to mobile apps to server-side stuff. And of course, with WordPress and its move into the block system, JavaScript and React and have become even more important. So that's been the biggest change, I think, as from a programming standpoint and trying to basically keep up. The really annoying thing about JavaScript is just the number of frameworks that it's spawned. A programmer's favorite thing is to reinvent the wheel. The number of programmers, for instance, who have written their own blog engine just because, right? Because there weren't enough of them out there. There's only 1,000. JavaScript frameworks are the same way. I've never seen a language spin up so many weird frameworks, or just a multiple of them, like all at once. So that's I started in PHP and MySQL, and then got into like just vanilla JavaScript. So for me, one of the difficult things has just been, choosing which frameworks to try to be a little bit conversant in, if not completely conversant, just because of the sheer numbers.
Remember how many websites that you built and worked on?
That's a good question. I would guess hundreds at this point. Because again, especially in the beginning, I did do just a lot of like small fixes, for either running a database repair or cleaning up a hacked WordPress site, small fixes. So definitely, especially for WordPress, it's definitely in the hundreds at this point.
So you also fix the plugins in the WordPress.
Yeah, I do some custom plugin development. With WordPress, the best thing about it is all the plugins, and the worst thing about it is all the plugins. So with a lot of times I'll wind up, looking for like plugin conflicts. A lot of the weird behavior that people will find on their WordPress sites that will just drive like a site owner crazy will often turn out to be two plugins that just aren't playing nice together, right? That's less common than it used to be as like coding standards have gotten better and like they're sort of in this established way now. There's sort of a right way to do plugins now. Not everybody follows it, but it's out there. So yeah, cleaning up plugin conflicts, and then I've also done written custom plugins to add like a specific feature for sites. I did one a couple of months ago. It was like a simple sync plugin so that all the content from site A, all the custom post types from site A would be immediately sent over and published in a different custom post type on site B. So like, custom stuff like that, where there's not a perfect existing solution, but I can build one pretty quick.
What technologies you know?
My main ones are PHP, MySQL. Still a big fan of jQuery. I know that makes me old. I know we're all going over to React and Vue and stuff in JavaScript, but I'm still a fan of jQuery. Still use it for simple stuff in WordPress. Vanilla JavaScript. I'm now finally learning React, getting proficient in that. Well, proficient enough to do what I need to do in WordPress, basically. And then Laravel, big fan of that project. Very handy with Zapier, which I love. I can't imagine what we all did before Zapier. Just being able to connect different systems and automate, flows of information where, that in the past, before Zapier, you were going to write 1,000 lines of code to connect 3 or 4 different services and hope their APIs were documented. That's been a huge help. Let me see what other tech. That's the main stuff. I do, bash scripts, of course, because I do basic like the server maintenance. So bash scripts, and I know just enough Python to be very dangerous, but not terribly useful.
So what projects that you did? I mean, for what kind of industries that you built?
Plugins and industries.
Uh, uh, Websites in WordPress
So
for
yeah,
which that you built?
so I've done everything from publications to back in the day blogs, brochure style sites, e-commerce stores using WooCommerce. I've done quite a bit of work in WooCommerce. A lot of connecting and extending Gravity forms for everything from like lead generation to, plugging it into a client's CRM so information flows from their website to every other system that they need. Now I'm using Gravity Forms to build, SaaS applications targeted at different kinds of creators. I worked in higher education for a while, so I developed applications for students who needed tutoring and things like that. And then I think those are the main ones. Oh, and then membership sites, of course. WordPress is great for membership sites too, and several of my current clients are running very successful membership sites on that platform.
And what is the difficult project that you did?
So the system that I built for that university was probably that student tutoring registration system was probably the most difficult, not because there was anything terribly difficult about, creating a database backend and a Laravel front end for a registration system, but because that system needed to integrate with a bunch of other university systems that were not at all open or friendly or terribly well documented. So that project was difficult in that, when I wanted to get data out of one of those other university systems and integrate it with the system that I was building, because there was no documentation, it was just a ton of trial and error, right? You never knew what, like the LDAP system was going to return because it wasn't completely standard, things of that nature. So just all that sort of investigative work. And then, of course, in a large institution, most of the difficulty and bottlenecks is when you need permission from another department or help from another department, things like that. So that was the most difficult one, but not because of the technology, again, just because of the environment you get in larger organizations. And the best thing about being being an indie and working on your own project is you don't have to ask anybody for permission or ask a client for a spec, right? You've got the idea, you know what you want it to do, and you just start building. And that's such a great joy. Especially when you've spent years building other people's ideas.
So you like automation tools?
Yeah, I love them. I know some programmers were sort of worried about them, maybe still are, in terms of the more automation tools, the less programmer time you're going to need. But in my experience, it's not like the demand for programmers has gone down at all in the last 20 years, right? It's only gone up. So yeah, anything I could automate for myself, for a client, anything that stops a human being from having to do something boring and rote, I would absolutely prefer to automate. Yeah.
And no code tools?
Oh yeah, I love those too. Like I made it a point the last year or so to really look around because I've been in the WordPress ecosystem for so long, right? Or Laravel and PHP specifically for so long. I made it a point to really look around and see what other kinds of website builders were out there, especially no-code tools. So and I'm super impressed with what some people have built out there in that arena. Carrd, CARRD.co is this amazing website builder. It's probably the best value for the money you can find if you just need a one-page website. And a lot of businesses starting out, like a one-page website is all you need, or a lot of projects to start out. A one-page website is fine. Carrd has a free version that gets you most of the way, and then the paid version is only like $19 a year, I think, last I looked, starting out. And that gets you form submissions. It's all no code. You can plug it into Zapier. That's one of my favorites. I like Ghost a lot as a CMS. That's one where you don't need any code. I haven't played much with like the real no code app builders like Bubble or what's the other one that's really popular? There's several of them out there now, but I haven't played with those yet, but I'd like to give those a shot one day too, because I know those can be very powerful and cut down, especially on like when you're building a prototype and you just want to see if the idea has legs, get it validated, and see if you should spend the time to, refine it and code it.
So websites are building on WordPress in the internet. So what is WordPress contribution to the internet?
To the internet as a whole, well, I think WordPress's contribution has been, it was the first thing to make online publishing reasonably accessible to just anybody, right? Whether you were going to WordPress.com and letting them just spin it up for you and host it, or whether you were going to one of those third-party hosting providers that had the one-click installs. I think WordPress was the first thing that made that really accessible and available to people. Movable type got a lot of the way there, but not as much, I don't think, back in the day. And I think the other great legacy of WordPress is it was one of the first systems to realize that, that letting users extend the core, like, WordPress being a relatively simple core product, and then having an approved method for the community to add features to it. I think it was one of the first projects to realize that the exponential growth that could lead to, and just the enormous capabilities that the community would add to it if allowed. So I think that's also its legacy. And I think in terms of open source projects overall, again, recently there's been some grumbling in the WordPress community just with how certain features have been included or how quickly they've been rolled out. I think that Matt Mullenweg and Automatic, the company that he founded behind WordPress, have on the whole been pretty amazing stewards of the project and the community. I know I'm not saying there's no criticism that can be applied there, but I think the vast majority of the time they've made good, like, future-looking, conscientious decisions for the product.
You work for, you give service, web services to your country or to other countries also?
Other countries too. Let me see. Most of my clients at the moment are based in the U.S., and then I have a few in Canada. Previously, I've done a little work with, I've been a subcontractor on projects where some of the team was in Belarus or some of the team was in Germany. So yeah, in general, getting to work with anybody all over the world is one of the real perks and benefits of being a web developer. My limitation there is that I only speak English, so that limits me in terms of collaborating.
Where do you live?
So I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is in the southern United States. Fayetteville, and specifically, is a medium-sized city of about 70,000, nice little college town. Not so little anymore, I guess. But it's got a kind of a cool, funky vibe to it. Very relaxed, and it's been growing like crazy, which is great. But growth brings problems, but it also means there's opportunity and businesses who need services and all that good stuff.
So you are an individual and independent contributor.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you started promoting yourself on social media from?
Yeah, so I recently, I've had a Twitter account for ages, but mostly I was just like a lurker, just reading. And then kind of got off it. I had to just delete it during the madness of the U.S. just political culture wars over a few years ago. I just got tired of looking at all that. And then finally it occurred to me, I saw some other developers being very successful, or just other creators in general, just being very successful at talking about their work while they were building it, and pulling in a community that was also interested, and then being able to create products that the community was interested in and sell those in addition to, share their knowledge. And so that got me back into it. And so for the last year or so, I've really been, trying to engage on Twitter and talk about the work, and use the mute filters for all those topics that I don't want to hear about anymore. Twitter's great once you mute certain keywords.
So you're into web development from a long time. So what do you like most about it?
That's a good question. A couple of things. First, there's that amazing feeling when you take something that doesn't work and make it work. And there's a lot of frustration that leads up to that point. I think actually the most important skill for a developer is just being able to not throw your laptop out the window when you've been, banging on something for 4 hours and it's still broken. But when you finally click it, right, and you take a system that did not work, and because of your efforts now it does work, that's a great feeling. Being able to, I guess, just a sort of being able to have a creative ambition and then realize it, build it, and launch it to a global audience in days, right? That's insane. We've forgotten like how magical that is. I mean, it's only been around for 20 years, and really 10 as social media has exploded and more people have gotten online, right? But I think it's only been around for a brief time, and we've already forgotten how magical that concept is. That you can take an idea, whether it's a publication or some service app or whatever it is, and put it in front of a global audience in a matter of days, and maybe even have them pay you for it. I mean, that's bananas, but we treat it like it's commonplace just because we've gotten used to it.
As a web developer working for your country, how is that, and working for other countries as a web developer, how is that? What is the difference that you experience?
I don't really notice much of a difference. Again, the only issue I've ever run into is a language barrier. But if the people I'm working for speak English, which is all I know how to speak, then, occasionally it's like a time zone difference. But with asynchronous work, or if you're emailing back and forth or using one of those project management tools online, even the time zone difference doesn't apply much. So I don't notice a great difference between whether I'm working for somebody who lives down the street from me or, somebody who's in Toronto or Vancouver. I don't really notice a difference. So
you worked on different web hosting platforms,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what you suggest, or what on which region data centers that you choose for your customers?
So which web host specifically do I like? So my favorite is DigitalOcean. And again, that's, they're a cloud server provider in the sense that you sign up for that and they're going to give you an empty Linux box, and it's yours to do, virtual box, and it's yours to do whatever you want with. So my favorite hosting setup for WordPress is to use DigitalOcean for the server. Then I use a service called ServerPilot, which just customizes a bare DigitalOcean droplet for WordPress and PHP applications specifically. So you connect ServerPilot to your bare bones DigitalOcean server, and it goes in there and adds everything that WordPress is going to need to be fast and reliable. And then once that is set up, depending on what the client needs, whether it's, if they need like an aggressive caching system just to serve tons and tons and tons of pages, or if they're running some like membership sites, a lot of times can't be cached because you need unique info served to everybody who logs in. When that happens, of course, then you can spin up an even bigger server or upgrade your server at DigitalOcean very quickly, like as your program grows. So that's my favorite. The issue with recommending that to non-programmers is that, of course, you have to know how to spin up a Linux box and do certain things to use DigitalOcean. Other than that, I've had good experiences getting clients on WP Engine. Good experiences with Kinsta, another good host. I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple that I regularly recommend. There's a long list of hosts that I will immediately tell a client not to use. The list of ones that I like is quite short.
So working with clients who are into technology and working with non-technical clients, which one is easier for you?
That's a good question. It depends on the project. So I would say it depends both on the kind of project that we're doing, and it depends also on how much like a technically inclined client actually knows, if that makes sense. Sometimes a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. So sometimes somebody who knows a little bit about web building or web programming will want to interject into the how that you're building things instead of sticking to the what and the why. I've heard some people complain about non-technical clients, but the one thing a non-technical client never says is, why did you write that class that way? Why did you write that function that way? Why did you code that plugin that way? Right? Because they don't care. They want it to work. They want it to be on time and on budget, and they want it to do what you said it would do. So I wouldn't say that I have a distinct preference. I would say that when building more complicated things, the benefit of working with another technical person is just that there's a lot that doesn't need to be said, right? There's a lot you don't need to explain. Like right now, I'm working on a project with someone who has a reasonable technical background in building and is also a skilled designer. And so, he is both designing the site for me to build, and when he throws over a design, he'll put, this might be a good custom post type, but that's up to you, that kind of thing. So I guess I enjoy both is the short answer.
You also create custom themes for WordPress?
Yeah, I've done a lot of custom theme builds for clients. I'm trying to get one finished to sell, like just an off-the-shelf theme to put up and sell. Part of the problem with there is, again, that right now WordPress theme development is a mess. Isn't exactly the right word, but there are a lot of different ways to do it at the moment, and it's still sort of being worked out which one I think is the best going forward. But I've got a block theme, like half finished, that I want to get out to the world and see if that sells.
So as a web developer, as an independent web developer, and also as a service provider, what do you say to my audience about yourself? To non-technical and technical people who are watching and listening to a conversation from anywhere on this planet?
Oh, sure. I would say, if you're hearing FUD about WordPress, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, don't worry about it. It's not going anywhere. It's a strong platform. It's going to be around for a long time. It's incredibly flexible. In terms of my own services, particularly for anyone looking for regular monthly help, if you've got a going project, if you've been frustrated with just knowing who to call. My monthly clients that I have right now have consistently said that the best thing about my service is that they don't have to worry about who to call when something goes wrong, because they sign up for me with the monthly thing. They know I'm always going to be there. And I would also say, one of the real difficulties, especially if you're a non-technical person, you want a website built, a web app built, particularly in the WordPress space, is that the term WordPress developer means such a huge variety of things. I mean, there are people who would call themselves a WordPress developer just simply because they know how to install like a custom fields plugin and a page building plugin. right? And you can get a long way with that. I mean, I'm not knocking that level of knowledge. But then you've got somebody who calls themselves a WordPress developer, who builds these incredibly advanced and complicated plugins using both PHP and React, from scratch. And so WordPress developer is often used to apply to both of those categories of people. And so I think one of the difficulties for non-technical clients is understanding what kind of developer their project actually needs when they go looking for somebody.
So, at last, what is your observation about my questioning in this conversation, and also about your observation about my videos on YouTube?
Well, I think it's great. You got this huge variety of people you've talked to. So that was really cool. When I looked at there, I was surprised. You got like a variety of people doing a variety of different things. I think it's great. One of the drawbacks to being a web developer, I think in general, but specifically with being an indie, is it's so easy just to get like tunnel vision. Especially when you're trying to get products out there, you want to be fast and efficient, code, right? Is that you forget to look up and like see what other people are doing. Like you forget to look up and like find a community to where you can just have conversations like this and talk about what you're doing and learn about what other people are doing. You can kind of get in your own silo and miss being part of that larger conversation. I've been really surprised with since I started trying to take a more active role on Twitter and just share what I know about WordPress and connect with other developers and other creators. I've been really surprised by how helpful and pleasant that side of tech Twitter is versus some of the other corners of Twitter, which are just cesspools. And it's been great to not only to like get more followers, but to be able to actually engage with people and talk to them and get out of that silo and have those kinds of conversations like the ones that you're having.
And I did masters in software engineering and also bachelor's in computer science and engineering.
Nice.
So yeah, and also I'm right now I'm working on I'm preparing for AWS solutions architect and engineer position. So also I'm writing content I'm writing content the services AWS services experience
Nice.
on website. So I'm into actually development, engineering, but I'm talking with people. This is not my job. I created this job. I created this learning platform to learn from experts like you who are already in the industry how you people are making things, what you did, how you did, and how you're making things done, and what is your observation about the evolution of the technology. So how these experiences collecting from also from experts in the industry from globally, how this experience to be helpful for me if I work in IT in coming days.
Oh, how the experience all this might help as you go ahead. Well, I think again, I think as developers, because we do tend to get just so laser focused on whatever we're learning or building at the time, like becoming an AWS architect. First of all, good on you because there's a huge demand for that. I know. But it's just such an enormous amount to learn, right? So you get sort of laser focused on that. So I think the great benefit, of you talking to other people as you get started is you're going to start with a sense of the whole picture, right? Because it's so easy when you're getting started, you're so focused on whatever your chosen stack is and advancing in that and either getting jobs or building a client base that you don't really have a side of the larger picture. And I think a side of that larger picture is really helpful, not just as you choose what to learn, but like as you make career decisions and as you just building that sense of like what all is out there and everything that your skills might be applied to, I think gives you a much more useful perspective as you make decisions.
I'll put your web links on the screen as well as in the description of this video.
Okay.
They can see the services that you're providing and the work that you're doing, and if they want your service, and if they want to connect with you, they can connect and they can see what you're doing and how you are helpful for them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you spell your websites or any web links of yours with my audience who are listening to this conversation on podcast?
Yeah, sure. So my first little SaaS project for getting domain reminders is noexpire.domains. So it's NOEXP as in pop IRE.domains. And then my WordPress consultancy is called Oddjar, and that's OD as in dog, D as in dog, JAR.com. Those are my main two. If this is completely off topic for tech, but my little passion project is a podcast where my buddy and I talk about scary movies, horror movies. And you can find that at welladjusted.show. And it's Well Adjusted on all the major podcast networks. If you search for Well Adjusted, you'll find us if you like scary movies.
So can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Of course.
And also, can I put this audio and video clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your valuable time and spending your valuable words on my show.
Thank you. This is very cool. Thanks for reaching out and for providing this to the community.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, man. Bye.